What would you do if you watched your partner flirt dance with a stranger for a harmless bet and then realize they had no idea you were standing there seeing every second of it? The bass thumped through my chest as I surveyed the crowded dance floor at the Velvet Loop. The dim lighting cast everything in a sultry red glow, and I felt alive in a way I hadn't in months. My marriage to Daniel had become so predictable, so boring. Here, surrounded by pulsing music and the energy of strangers, I remembered what it felt like to be desirable. "Come on, Philo," Amaris shouted over the music, her perfectly manicured hand gripping my wrist. "You've been complaining about how Daniel treats you like furniture for weeks. Here's your chance to prove you've still got it." I laughed, taking another sip of my cosmopolitan. The alcohol had loosened my inhibitions just enough to make Amaris's dare seem thrilling instead of stupid. "You're insane. I'm a married woman with a 7-year-old daughter." "Exactly why you need this," Amaris insisted, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Look, it's harmless. Just dance with some random guy, make him want you, and walk away. $50 says you can't get a complete stranger to buy you a drink within 10 minutes. The other girls from our monthly night out giggled and nodded encouragingly. Sarah from accounting leaned in. "Philo, you're gorgeous. Daniel's an idiot if he doesn't appreciate what he has." Their words fed something hungry inside me. At 32, I still turned heads, still had the curves and confidence that had attracted Daniel 9 years ago. But lately, he barely looked up from his laptop when I walked into a room. When was the last time he'd complimented me? When had we last had a real conversation that didn't involve Tessa's school schedule or household bills? My phone buzzed. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. "Hey babe, how's girls' night? Home by midnight?" I stared at the text, irritation flaring. Even when I was out, he had to check up on me like I was a teenager with a curfew. I shoved the phone back into my purse without responding. "See? There he goes again," I said to Amaris, showing her the message. "Treating me like I can't take care of myself." "Exactly. So prove you're still the independent woman he fell in love with," Amaris encouraged. "One dance, one drink. Show yourself you've still got the magic." The challenge sparked something rebellious in me. I downed the rest of my drink and stood up, smoothing my black dress over my hips. "Fine. But I picked the guy." I scanned the bar area, looking for the right target. Not too young. I wasn't trying to be predatory. Not too drunk. That would be too easy. My eyes settled on a tall man with dark hair, leaning against the far end of the bar. He was probably late 20s, wearing a casual button-down that showed off a lean build. Perfect. "Him," I pointed discreetly. Amaris clapped her hands together. "Evan? Oh, he's one of the bartenders here. Good choice, he's gorgeous and single." I felt a thrill of excitement as I made my way across the crowded floor. The music seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. This was just harmless fun, I told myself. Daniel would never know, and I'd get to remember what it felt like to be wanted by someone who actually paid attention. Evan looked up as I approached, his smile warm and welcoming. "What can I get you?" "Surprise me," I said, leaning against the bar just close enough that our arms almost touched. "Something that matches my mood." "And what mood is that?" His eyes held mine, genuinely interested. "Dangerous," I replied, amazed at how easily the flirtation came back to me. He laughed, a rich sound that made my stomach flutter. "Dangerous it is." He began mixing something with practiced ease, his movements confident and fluid. "I'm Evan." "Philomene, but everyone calls me Philo." Beautiful name for a beautiful woman. The line should have sounded cheesy, but the way he said it, with genuine warmth rather than sleazy pickup artist energy, made me blush. He slid a dark purple cocktail across the bar. "Dragon's blood, vodka, blackberry liqueur, and a few secret ingredients. Fair warning, it's stronger than it tastes." I took a sip, maintaining eye contact. The drink was perfect, sweet with a dangerous bite. "It's incredible. You clearly know what you're doing." I try to pay attention to what people need, he said, and something in his tone suggested he wasn't just talking about drinks. The conversation flowed easily. Evan was charming without being pushy, funny without trying too hard. He asked about my work. I was an HR coordinator at a mid-sized consulting firm, and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. When was the last time Daniel had asked about my day and actually listened to the response? "So what brings you out tonight?" Evan asked as he wiped down glasses, his attention split between me and his work. "Girls' night. My friend Amaris dared me to—" I paused, suddenly aware of how ridiculous it would sound. "Actually, never mind. It's stupid." "Come on, now I'm curious." His grin was infectious. "She bet me I couldn't get a stranger to buy me a drink," I admitted, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. Evan threw back his head and laughed. "Well, mission accomplished. This one's on the house." He gestured to my nearly empty glass. "Though I have to say, she underestimated the competition. You could have your pick of guys in here." The compliment sent warmth through my chest. "You're just being nice." "I'm being honest. Trust me, I see a lot of people come through here. You've got something special." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Your husband's a lucky man." I should have corrected him then. Should have mentioned Daniel, talked about my marriage, remembered my responsibilities. Instead, I found myself saying, "What makes you think I'm married?" He glanced at my left hand where my wedding ring caught the bar lights. "Lucky guess." "Sometimes I forget it's there," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. Lately, the ring felt more like a burden than a symbol of love. The music shifted to something slower, more sensual. Bodies pressed closer together on the dance floor. Evan's shift was ending. I could see another bartender taking over his section. "Dance with me," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "I thought you'd never ask." He came around the bar and offered his hand. His palm was warm, slightly rough from work. He led me onto the dance floor, where the lights were dimmer, the crowd thicker. The song was something sultry and hypnotic, the kind of music that made you move without thinking. Evan was a good dancer, confident but not showy, leading without being controlling. His hand settled on my waist, respectful but firm. We moved together naturally, as if we'd done this 100 times before. The alcohol and the music, and the thrill of doing something forbidden combined into a heady rush. "You're full of surprises," he murmured near my ear, his breath warm against my neck. I let myself sink into the moment, into the feeling of being desired and appreciated. This was what I'd been missing, this electric connection, this sense of being truly seen. When Evan spun me around, I laughed with genuine joy for the first time in months. The song ended, but we didn't separate immediately. For a moment, we just stood there, his hand still on my waist, faces closer than they should have been. "I should get back to my friends," I said reluctantly. "Of course." He stepped back, but his eyes never left mine. This was unexpected. Good unexpected or bad unexpected. Definitely good. He pulled out his phone. "I know you're married, and I respect that. But if you ever want to talk, or dance, or just have someone listen—" He handed me his number, written on a cocktail napkin. I took it, my fingers brushing his. "Thank you. For the drink, for the dance, for making me feel like the amazing woman you are?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Then I walked back to my table, tucking the napkin into my purse before anyone could see. "Oh my God, Philo!" Amaris squealed as I sat down. "That was incredible. You two looked like you were about to set the whole place on fire." The other girls chimed in with compliments and questions. I basked in their attention, in the validation that I could still attract a man like Evan. But as I glanced back toward the bar, I caught sight of something that made my blood run cold. A man in a dark coat stood near the entrance, partially hidden by the crowd. The lighting made it hard to see his face clearly, but something about his posture, his build, looked familiar. Very familiar. "Amaris," I grabbed her arm. Do you see that guy by the door, in the dark jacket? She squinted through the crowd. Which one? There are like 10 guys in dark jackets. I looked again, but the figure had vanished. My heart hammered against my ribs. It couldn't have been Daniel. He was home with Tessa, probably asleep by now. My imagination was just playing tricks on me, guilt making me paranoid. But as we left the bar an hour later, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching. I slipped into the house at 1:30 a.m., my heels in my hand to avoid making noise on the hardwood floors. The living room was dark, except for the blue glow of the television, some late-night talk show playing to an empty couch. Daniel must have fallen asleep waiting for me. Good. I wasn't ready to face questions about why I was 90 minutes past my promised return time. I crept upstairs, pausing outside Tessa's room to peek in. My daughter was fast asleep, her dark hair spread across her pillow, one arm wrapped around her favorite stuffed elephant. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. A pang of guilt shot through me. What kind of example was I setting? But then I remembered the feeling of Evan's hands on my waist, the way he'd looked at me like I was the most fascinating woman in the world, and the guilt faded. I deserved to feel attractive, desired. There was nothing wrong with a little harmless flirtation. I made it to our bedroom without waking Daniel. He was sprawled across his side of the bed, still in his work clothes, laptop open beside him. Even in sleep, he looked stressed, his forehead creased with worry lines that seemed to deepen every year. When had we stopped being partners and started being roommates? When had conversations about mortgage payments replaced late-night talks about our dreams? I couldn't remember the last time he'd surprised me, or even seemed to really see me. I changed into pajamas and slipped under the covers, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Evan's smile, felt the electric thrill of being wanted. My phone buzzed softly, a text from Amaris. "Girl, you were on fire tonight. That bartender couldn't take his eyes off you. Daniel better step up his game before someone else sweeps you away." I smiled in the darkness, typing back quickly. It felt amazing to remember I'm still desirable. Thanks for pushing me out of my comfort zone. Any time, babe. You deserve to feel gorgeous. See you Monday. I tucked the phone under my pillow and finally drifted off, dreams filled with pulsing music and the memory of strong hands guiding me across a dance floor. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Tessa's cartoons downstairs and the smell of coffee. Daniel was already gone, his side of the bed cold, laptop missing from the nightstand. He must have left early for his Saturday morning routine at the office. Typical. I found Tessa in the kitchen, still in her princess pajamas, eating cereal and watching her tablet. "Morning, sweetheart. Where's Daddy?" "He left," she said without looking up. "He seemed sad." "Sad? Why do you think he was sad?" Tessa shrugged, her 7-year-old attention already back on her show. But her words nagged at me. Had Daniel noticed how late I'd come home? Was he upset about something? My phone rang, Daniel's name on the screen. "Hey," I answered, trying to sound casual. "Morning." His voice was flat, professional. "I'm at the office catching up on some accounts. I'll be home around noon." "On Saturday? Daniel, you work too much." "Some of us have to." There was an edge to his tone I didn't like. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Forget it. How was your night out?" The question felt loaded somehow, but I couldn't put my finger on why. "Fine. Just dancing and drinks with the girls. You know how it is." "Do I?" "Daniel, what's wrong with you today? You're being weird." A long pause. "We'll talk when I get home." He hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone, irritation building. What was his problem? I'd gone out with friends, something I did once a month, something he'd never objected to before. If he was going to be jealous and controlling, that was his issue to deal with. The morning passed slowly. I did laundry, cleaned the kitchen, helped Tessa with a puzzle. Normal Saturday activities that felt strangely hollow. My mind kept drifting back to the night before, to the way Evan had made me laugh, the way he'd listened when I talked. Daniel came home just after noon, his expression unreadable. He kissed Tessa's forehead and nodded at me, barely acknowledgement. "How was work?" I asked, determined to be normal. "Productive." He grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat at the kitchen table, opening his laptop again. "It's Saturday, Daniel. Can't you take a break?" "Bills don't pay themselves." His tone was so dismissive, so condescending. Heat flared in my chest. "I work too, you know. I contribute to this household." "Never said you didn't." "Then why are you acting like you're the only one with responsibilities?" He finally looked at me, his brown eyes tired. "Where were you last night, Philo?" "I told you, out with Amaris and the girls." "Where, specifically?" "Why does it matter? Some bar downtown. We danced, we talked, we had drinks. Normal girls' night stuff. Until 1:30 a.m.? So he had noticed. Time got away from us. It happens. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You said you'd be home by midnight." "Plans change. I'm an adult, Daniel. I don't need a curfew." "You have a family, responsibilities. And I take care of them every single day." My voice rose, and I saw Tessa glance over nervously from the living room. I lowered my tone but kept the edge. "One night a month, Daniel. I go out one night a month with my friends. That's not exactly abandoning my family." "It's not about frequency. It's about respect." "Respect?" I laughed bitterly. "That's rich, coming from someone who spends more time with his laptop than his wife. That's not fair. Isn't it? When's the last time we had a real conversation? When's the last time you asked about my day and actually listened to the answer? When's the last time you made me feel like you even wanted to be married to me?" Daniel's face went pale. "Philo." "No, I'm serious. You treat me like I'm part of the furniture. Like I'm just here to take care of Tessa and keep your house clean and warm your bed when it's convenient. That's not true, isn't it?" I was on a roll now, months of resentment pouring out. "You know what happened last night? A complete stranger made me feel more attractive and interesting in 2 hours than you have in 2 years." The words hung in the air between us. Daniel's expression shifted from confusion to something harder, more guarded. "What stranger?" I realized I'd said too much, but I was too angry to back down. "Just some guy at the bar. The point is, he actually paid attention to me. He listened when I talked. He made me feel like I mattered." "What guy, Philo?" "It doesn't matter who he was. It was just conversation." "Just conversation?" "Yes. God, Daniel, you're so paranoid. I can't even talk to another human being without you getting suspicious." He stared at me for a long moment, then closed his laptop with a sharp snap. "I'm going for a drive." "Running away? That's mature." "I need to think." "About what? About how to be a better husband? About how to actually notice your wife?" He stood up, grabbing his keys from the counter. "About whether my wife still wants to be married to me." The words hit like a slap. "Daniel, don't be dramatic." "Am I being dramatic? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're already shopping for my replacement." "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" He paused at the kitchen door. "You came home 90 minutes late, reeking of alcohol and cologne that wasn't mine. You're telling me about some stranger who made you feel things I apparently can't. What am I supposed to think?" "You're supposed to trust me." "Trust goes both ways, Philo, and right now I'm not sure you've earned mine." He left, the front door closing with quiet finality behind him. I stood in the kitchen, shaking with anger and something else, something that might have been fear. From the living room, Tessa's small voice called out, "Mommy, why are you and Daddy yelling?" I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay calm. "We're just having a disagreement, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups need to talk through things." "Are you getting divorced like Emma's parents?" The question pierced straight through me. "No, baby. Daddy and I are just working through some stuff. Everything's going to be okay." But as I said the words, I wondered if I believed them myself. Later that evening, after Daniel had returned home and we'd maintained a tense civility through dinner and Tessa's bedtime routine, I found myself alone in our bedroom, staring at the cocktail napkin with Evan's number. Just talking to him had made me feel alive again. Was that so wrong? Was wanting to feel valued and desired such a terrible thing? I picked up my phone and typed a quick text. "Hi, it's Philo from last night. Thank you again for the lovely evening." I hit send before I could change my mind. The response came back within minutes. "I was hoping I'd hear from you. How are you feeling today?" "Confused," I typed back, "but better for talking to you." "Want to talk about it? I'm a good listener." And just like that, I was pulled back into the intoxicating feeling of being truly heard. 3 weeks later, I was practically floating as I got ready for Daniel's mother's birthday dinner. Paula Vane had never been my biggest fan, but family gatherings were important to Daniel, and I'd promised to make an effort. Besides, I had something to celebrate. My texting relationship with Evan had blossomed into something that made every day brighter. Nothing inappropriate, just friendly conversations that reminded me I was still an interesting, desirable woman. He asked about my work, remembered details from previous conversations, and made me laugh with stories from the bar. More importantly, he listened, really listened. When I complained about Daniel's emotional distance, Evan offered genuine sympathy and insight. When I shared my frustrations about feeling invisible in my own marriage, he reminded me of my worth. "You look nice," Daniel said as I put on my earrings. His tone was neutral, polite, the same way he might compliment a coworker's presentation. "Thanks." I smoothed my dress, a deep blue number that Evan had complimented in one of our text exchanges. Not that I'd bought it for him, of course. It just felt good to wear something that made me feel confident. The drive to Paula's house was quiet. Daniel focused on the road while I texted with Amaris about her latest dating disaster. In the back seat, Tessa played a game on her tablet, occasionally giggling at something on the screen. "Put the phone away when we get there," Daniel said as we pulled into his mother's driveway. "It's rude to text during family dinner." "I know how to behave at dinner, Daniel." He gave me a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Do you?" Before I could ask what he meant, we were walking up the front steps of Paula's perfectly maintained colonial house. She answered the door with a warm smile. For Daniel and Tessa, and a considerably cooler one for me. "Philomene, you look festive." "Thank you, Paula. Happy birthday." The house was full of Daniel's extended family, his brother Marcus with his wife and kids, various aunts and uncles, family friends I'd met a dozen times but whose names I could never quite remember. Everyone was warm and welcoming, the kind of close-knit family gathering I'd grown up envying. My own mother, Cleo, had driven up from Florida for the occasion. She was holding court in the living room, regaling everyone with stories from her latest cruise adventure. At 58, she was still beautiful in a well-preserved way, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite the travel. "Darling," she swept me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and white wine. "You look wonderful. Doesn't she look wonderful, Daniel?" "She always does," Daniel replied automatically, but his attention was already elsewhere, helping his father with drinks. The evening progressed normally at first. Dinner was delicious, conversation flowed easily, and Tessa charmed everyone with her precocious observations about second grade. I found myself relaxing, enjoying the warmth of family connection. It was during dessert that Amaris's name appeared on my phone screen. I glanced at the message and couldn't help smiling. "What's so funny?" Marcus asked, noticing my expression. "Oh, just my friend Amaris. She's having another dating adventure." "The one who talks you into those wild girls' nights?" Cleo asked with a knowing smile. "They're not wild, Mum. We just go out and have fun." "Nothing wrong with that," Cleo continued. "A woman needs to feel alive, especially when she's married to someone who works all the time." She shot a pointed look at Daniel, who was cutting cake with mechanical precision. "Mom," I warned, but she was already warming to her theme. "I'm just saying, marriage shouldn't mean the end of excitement. Take last month. Philo told me about this charming bartender who swept her off her feet on the dance floor. Made her feel like a queen, didn't he, sweetheart? The room went quiet. I felt heat flood my cheeks as every eye turned toward me. Daniel's knife paused mid-cut through Paula's birthday cake. Mum, it wasn't like that. Oh, don't be modest. You said he was gorgeous, and the way you two danced was like something out of a movie. What was his name? Eric? Ethan? Evan, I said quietly, wishing the floor would open up and swallow me. That's right, Evan. And he gave you his number, didn't he? Very romantic. The silence stretched until Marcus cleared his throat awkwardly. So, how about those Yankees? But Paula wasn't going to let it slide that easily. I'm sorry, did I miss something? Philomene, you're dancing with strange men and collecting phone numbers? It wasn't like that, I said, my voice stronger now. It was just dancing. Harmless fun. Harmless? Paula's voice could have cut glass. You're a married woman. I'm also a human being. I'm allowed to have conversations with other people. Conversations? Daniel's voice was deadly quiet. Is that what we're calling it? All my frustration from the past 3 weeks came boiling up. Yes, Daniel. Conversations. You know, those things where two people actually listen to each other and show interest in what the other person is thinking and feeling. Philo, Cleo said, sensing the shift in mood. Maybe we should... No, Mom. I'm tired of pretending everything is perfect. I turned to face Daniel fully. You want to know about Evan? Fine. He's intelligent, funny, and he actually pays attention when I talk. He remembers things I tell him. He makes me feel like I matter. Jesus, Philo, Marcus muttered. What? I'm not allowed to have friends. I'm not allowed to feel appreciated. You're married, Paula said sharply. Your husband should be the one making you feel appreciated. Exactly, I threw my hands up. But he doesn't. When's the last time Daniel complimented me on anything other than dinner? When's the last time he asked about my day and actually listened to the answer? When's the last time he made me feel like he was glad to be married to me? Daniel set down the cake knife with careful control. Are you done? No, I'm not done. Everyone's acting like I committed some terrible sin. But all I did was dance with someone who treated me like I was worth his time. All you did? Daniel's voice was getting dangerously quiet. You came home at 1:30 a.m. reeking of another man's cologne. You've been texting with him for 3 weeks. You just announced to my entire family that he makes you feel things I apparently can't. Because it's true. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just gone off. Tessa started crying quietly, overwhelmed by the adult emotions she couldn't understand. Paula looked like she'd swallowed something sour. Marcus was staring at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Well, Cleo said brightly, clearly trying to salvage the situation, I think what Philo means is that it's healthy for couples to have their own interests and friendships. Daniel, you can't expect her to be fulfilled entirely by domestic life. I expect her to be faithful, Daniel said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent room. I am faithful. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're having an emotional affair. That's ridiculous. We're friends. We text occasionally. Every day, Daniel said. You text with him every day, sometimes multiple times a day. The room went dead silent. Everyone was staring at me now, and I felt exposed, cornered. How would you know that? Because I pay attention to my wife, even when she thinks I don't. You're spying on me? I'm watching my marriage fall apart. Marcus stood up abruptly. Okay, I think maybe we should... No, I interrupted. I want to know what everyone thinks. Do you all think I'm such a terrible person for wanting to feel valued, for wanting someone to actually see me as more than a housekeeper and babysitter? Philo, stop, Cleo said, but there was less conviction in her voice now. I'm serious. Daniel works 60 hours a week. When he comes home, he's on his laptop or watching TV or dealing with bills. We haven't had a real conversation in months. We haven't been on a date in over a year. But I'm the villain because someone else finds me interesting. You're the villain because you're married, Paula said coldly. You took vows, you made promises, and you're breaking them. I haven't broken anything, haven't you? Daniel stood up slowly. You're emotionally invested in another man. You light up when you get texts from him. You dress up hoping he'll compliment you. You compare me to him and find me lacking. If that's not betrayal, what is? I opened my mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, I knew he was right. I had been comparing them. I did light up when Evan texted. I had bought the blue dress because he'd mentioned loving that color. I started, then stopped. That's what I thought. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. A banking app was open, showing recent transactions. I've opened a separate account. I'll be moving my direct deposit there on Monday. Daniel, you're being dramatic. Am I? Because this feels pretty real to me. He pocketed the phone and turned to his daughter. Come on, Tessa, let's get you home. What about cake? Tessa asked through her tears. Grandma will save you a piece. As they gathered their coats, the room remained frozen in uncomfortable silence. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat. Philo, I think you need to decide what you really want, because this isn't fair to anyone. I want my husband to love me, I said quietly. He does love you, Paula said, her voice softer now but still firm. But love isn't a one-way street. You can't demand attention and appreciation while giving your emotional energy to someone else. After they left, I sat in Paula's living room, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. The party was effectively over, family members making polite excuses and heading home early. Cleo sat beside me on the couch, her earlier enthusiasm completely deflated. Sweetheart, maybe you should think about what Daniel said. You were just defending me. I was trying to keep the peace. But honey, if you're texting with another man every day, if you're thinking about him, comparing him to your husband, that's not friendship, that's something else. So I'm supposed to be miserable. I'm supposed to accept being ignored and taken for granted. You're supposed to work on your marriage before you start looking elsewhere for what's missing. I stared at my hands, at the wedding ring that suddenly felt heavy and foreign. What if it's too late for that? Then you need to decide what you're going to do about it. But this middle ground you're living in, it's not fair to anyone, especially not to Tessa. The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. When I finally walked through our front door, Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table with a folder in front of him. We need to talk, he said. Daniel, I'm sorry about tonight. I didn't mean for it to come out like that. Didn't you? He looked up at me with eyes I barely recognized, because it felt like you've been wanting to say those things for a while. I was just frustrated. You were being honest, maybe for the first time in months. He opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper, bank statements, phone records, printouts I couldn't immediately identify. What is this? Evidence, he said simply, of what my marriage has become. And that's when I realized that Daniel wasn't the pushover I'd thought he was. That quiet, methodical nature I'd grown to resent. He'd been using it to build a case. Against me. Monday morning hit me like a freight train. I'd barely slept, spending most of the weekend replaying the disaster at Paula's house and trying to process Daniel's ominous folder of evidence. He'd refused to discuss it further, saying only that we'd handle everything properly through the appropriate channels. What did that even mean? I dragged myself into the office, hoping work would provide some distraction from the chaos at home. Our consulting firm occupied 2 floors of a downtown building, and my HR department was tucked into a corner suite with decent natural light and the constant hum of productivity. Morning, Philo, chirped Rebecca, our newest hire. How was your weekend? Fine, I managed, settling at my desk with a large coffee and the hope that I could lose myself in employee reviews and policy updates. But concentration was impossible. Every few minutes, my phone would buzz with a text from Evan asking if I was okay, if I wanted to talk. His concern was sweet, but it also made me feel guilty. Had I given him the wrong impression? Had I led him to believe there was more between us than friendship? Around 10 a.m., Amaris appeared at my cubicle with her usual bright smile and a box of donuts from the good bakery down the street. "Emergency sugar delivery," she announced. "You sounded terrible when you texted last night." I'd given her a brief rundown of the birthday dinner disaster, though I'd left out some of the more damaging details. Even now, I wasn't ready to admit how bad things had gotten. "Thanks," I said, accepting a chocolate-glazed donut I didn't really want. "I'm just stressed about Daniel being so dramatic about everything." "Men," Amaris said, rolling her eyes. "They have no imagination. You dance with one guy, have a few innocent conversations, and suddenly you're the villain. He should be grateful you're still interested in being attractive." "That's what I keep thinking. It's not like I'm having an affair." "Exactly. You're just remembering that you're a desirable woman. There's nothing wrong with that." But even as I nodded along with Amaris's reassurances, something felt off. The memory of Daniel's face at dinner, the hurt and anger I'd seen there, wouldn't leave me alone. And that folder of papers. "What kind of evidence could he have?" I asked, more to myself than to Amaris. "Evidence of what?" "He said he had evidence of what our marriage has become. He had bank statements, phone records, other stuff I couldn't see clearly." Amaris frowned. "That's creepy, Philo. He's spying on you." "Is he? Or is he just paying attention for the first time in years? Don't let him make you feel guilty. You haven't done anything wrong." But had I? The question followed me through the morning as I tried to focus on work. I found myself thinking about the past 3 weeks, about my daily text exchanges with Evan. What had started as friendly conversation had gradually become more intimate, more personal. I'd shared details about my marriage, my frustrations, my dreams. I'd looked forward to his messages more than I looked forward to coming home. Was that cheating? Around noon, my phone rang. Daniel's name on the screen made my stomach clench. "Hi," I answered cautiously. "I'm picking up Tessa from school today," he said without preamble. "She'll stay at my mother's tonight." "What? Why?" "Because we need to have a conversation without her hearing it." "Daniel, you're scaring me." "Good. Maybe you should be scared." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking slightly. This wasn't the Daniel I knew. The quiet, predictable man who avoided confrontation and preferred to suffer in silence. This version of my husband was cold, methodical, and apparently done with suffering. The afternoon crawled by. I made mistakes on simple tasks, forgot about a scheduled meeting, and snapped at Rebecca when she asked an innocent question about vacation policies. By 5 o'clock, I was a nervous wreck. I drove home through rush hour traffic, my mind racing through possible scenarios. What did Daniel want to discuss? What was in that folder? And why did Tessa need to be at her grandmother's? The house felt different when I walked in, emptier, more ominous. Daniel's car was in the driveway, but I couldn't hear the usual sounds of family life. No TV, no music, no chatter from Tessa's room. I found him in the kitchen, sitting at the table with the same folder from Sunday night. He'd changed out of his work clothes into jeans and a t-shirt, but somehow he looked more intimidating than he ever had in a business suit. "Where's Tessa?" I asked. "I told you, at my mother's." "For how long?" "That depends on you." I sat down across from him, my purse clutched in my lap like a shield. "Daniel, what's going on? You're acting like a stranger." "Funny, I was thinking the same thing about you." He opened the folder and began laying out papers with the methodical precision he brought to his accounting work. Bank statements showing my spending patterns, phone records highlighting the frequency of my texts with Evan, credit card receipts from bars and restaurants I'd visited during girls' nights out. "What is this?" "Documentation," he said simply, "of the last 6 months of our marriage." "You've been spying on me for 6 months." I've been trying to understand why my wife has been pulling away from me for 6 months, why she's been distant, distracted, and apparently looking for something I can't provide. I stared at the papers spread across our kitchen table. Seeing my life reduced to financial transactions and phone logs was surreal and invasive. This is crazy, Daniel. These are just normal expenses, normal communications. Are they? He pulled out a highlighted phone bill. 47 text messages to Evan's number in the past 3 weeks. Some as late as midnight, some as early as 6 a.m. We're friends. Friends text. Do they? He pulled out another sheet, a transcript that made my blood run cold. I know someone who works for the phone company. These are your actual messages from last Tuesday. I grabbed the paper, scanning the conversation with growing horror. Seen in black and white, stripped of context and emotion, my text with Evan looked damning. Complaints about Daniel, intimate details about our marriage, flirtatious exchanges that crossed lines I hadn't even realized I was approaching. You can't just get my text messages. That's illegal. Actually, it's not. We're married. Joint account. I have legal access to all communications on our family plan. This is insane. Is it? Because reading these, it sounds like you're in love with another man. I'm not in love with anyone. Then explain this. He pointed to a message from 3 days ago. I keep thinking about dancing with you, about how alive I felt in your arms. Daniel hasn't made me feel that way in years. I remembered writing those words, remembered the rush of emotional release I'd felt sharing my feelings with someone who seemed to understand. But seeing them now, in this context, they looked like betrayal. It's not what it looks like. What does it look like, Philo? Like I was confused, frustrated, looking for something I wasn't getting at home. And did you find it? The question hung between us. I wanted to lie, to minimize what had happened, to make it all go away. But Daniel's eyes were steady, patient, waiting for the truth. I don't know, I whispered. That's what I thought. He gathered up the papers with the same careful precision he'd used to lay them out. I've made an appointment with a lawyer for Thursday. A lawyer? Daniel, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, we can... Can we? Because from where I'm sitting, you've already made your choice. You've chosen to invest your emotional energy in another man. You've chosen to share intimate details of our marriage with a stranger. You've chosen to prioritize his attention over your family's stability. That's not fair, isn't it? He stood up, folder in hand. Tell me, Philo, when's the last time you looked at me the way you look at your phone when he texts? When's the last time you smiled at something I said the way you smile at his messages? I opened my mouth to argue, but no words came. Because he was right. I had been lighting up for Evan in ways I hadn't for Daniel in months. I'll be staying at Marcus's for the rest of the week, Daniel said. That'll give you time to think about what you really want. I want my family. Do you? Or do you want the security of marriage while pursuing whatever this is with Evan? It's not an affair. What would you call it? I struggled for words, for some way to explain the connection I felt with Evan that didn't sound like betrayal. But every explanation felt hollow. Every justification felt like another lie. I was lonely, I finally said. So was I. But I didn't go looking for someone else to fill the void. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I do love you. I've always loved you, but I won't share you. And I won't raise my daughter in a house where her mother is emotionally involved with another man. Daniel, please, think about what you want, Philo, really want. Because when I come back, I'm going to need an answer. The front door closed behind him with quiet finality. I sat alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my emotional infidelity, and finally understood the magnitude of what I'd done. My phone buzzed, a text from Evan. Thinking of you, hope your day got better. For the first time in 3 weeks, the message didn't make me smile. The rest of the week passed in a haze of regret and confusion. Daniel's absence from the house felt like a physical weight, a constant reminder of how badly I'd damaged our marriage. Tessa came home Tuesday night full of questions I couldn't answer. Why is Daddy sleeping at Uncle Marcus's house? Daddy and I are just working through some grown-up problems, sweetheart. Are you getting divorced? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I don't know, baby. I hope not. But hope felt fragile. Every day that passed without word from Daniel made the situation feel more permanent. I'd tried calling him twice, but both calls went straight to voicemail. When I'd texted asking when he was coming home, his response was brief. After I talked to the lawyer. Meanwhile, Evan had been texting regularly, concerned about my sudden change in mood. I'd been honest with him about the situation, that my marriage was in trouble, that Daniel had discovered our friendship and was threatening divorce. I'm sorry, he'd written. I never meant to cause problems for you. Maybe we should stop talking for a while. But the thought of losing the one person who seemed to understand me felt unbearable. It's not your fault. My marriage was already broken. You just helped me realize it. Thursday evening, I was helping Tessa with homework when Daniel's key turned in the front door. My heart jumped. Relief, fear, and anticipation all tangled together. He looked tired, older somehow. The stress of the past week had carved new lines around his eyes. Hi, Daddy. Tessa launched herself into his arms, and for a moment, his face softened completely. Hey, Princess, how was school? Good. I got an A on my math test. Mommy helped me study. That's wonderful. His eyes met mine over Tessa's head, unreadable. Can you help me finish my homework? Tessa asked. Of course, but first, Mommy and I need to talk. Why don't you go get ready for bed, and I'll come read you a story in a few minutes. Once Tessa was upstairs, Daniel and I faced each other in the living room. The space between us felt enormous. How did the lawyer meeting go? I asked. About like you'd expect. He sat down in his usual chair, but somehow he looked different in it, more distant, more resolved. I wanted to give you a chance to explain before I make any final decisions. Explain what? Whether you want to save our marriage or end it. The blunt question took my breath away. Of course I want to save it. Do you? Because your actions suggest otherwise. Daniel, I made a mistake. I was lonely and confused, and I let a friendship become something it shouldn't have been. But I never cheated on you. I never even kissed him. You didn't have to. You gave him your heart. The words hung in the air between us. I wanted to deny it, but the truth was more complicated than I'd been willing to admit. I don't love him, I said finally. Maybe not. But you love the way he makes you feel. You love the attention he gives you, the way he listens to you, the way he sees you. And you've been choosing that over working on what we have. Because what we have is broken. Is it? Or did we just stop trying? I stared at him, this man I'd married 9 years ago, this father of my child who was looking at me like I was a stranger. When did you stop loving me? I asked quietly. I never stopped loving you, but I did stop trying to compete with your fantasies about what your life should look like. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've been so focused on what's missing from our marriage that you stopped seeing what's actually there. I work 60 hours a week to provide for our family. I come home every night. I've never cheated, never lied to you, never made you doubt my commitment. But somehow, that's not enough. It's not about enough, Daniel. It's about connection. When's the last time we really talked? When's the last time you asked me about my dreams, my fears, my hopes for the future? When's the last time you asked me about mine? The question stopped me cold. When had I last asked Daniel about his dreams? When had I last shown interest in his inner life beyond the practical details of our shared existence? I started, then stopped. That's what I thought. He leaned back in his chair. Marriage isn't a performance, Philo. I don't exist to make you feel special and desired and interesting. That's not my job. Then what is your job? To be your partner, to build a life with you, to raise our daughter together, to be faithful and honest and present. But what about romance? What about passion? What about it? You want me to compete with some bartender who gets to know the fun, flirty version of you while I deal with mortgages and parent-teacher conferences and all the unglamorous reality of actual life. His words stung because they contained truth I didn't want to acknowledge. Evan knew the version of me that existed for 2 hours on a Saturday night. Dressed up, drinks flowing, responsibilities temporarily forgotten. Daniel knew the version that woke up with morning breath and worried about grocery budgets and dealt with Tessa's meltdowns. So what are you saying? That marriage is supposed to be boring? I'm saying marriage is supposed to be real, and real isn't always exciting. Sometimes it's just showing up day after day, even when it's hard. Like you showing up at Marcus's house instead of here. I needed space to think, to figure out if there's anything left worth fighting for. And what did you decide? He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. That depends on what you decide. Are you willing to cut contact with Evan completely? Are you willing to put the same energy into our marriage that you've been putting into your friendship with him? It's not that simple. Why not? Because I struggled to find words for the tangle of emotions inside me. Because I don't know how to go back to the way things were. I don't know how to pretend I don't need more than what we have. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking you to work with me instead of against me. What does that mean? It means marriage counseling. It means honest conversations about what we both need. It means putting our family first instead of chasing fantasies about what might be better somewhere else. The word fantasies hit like a slap. Is that what you think this is? A fantasy? Isn't it? You barely know this guy, Philo. You've had a few conversations, shared a dance, exchanged some texts. You've built him up in your mind as this perfect alternative to our imperfect reality. But you don't know what a real relationship with him would look like. You don't know how he handles stress, or money problems, or sick kids, or any of the things that actually make up a life together. Maybe not, but I know he makes me feel alive in a way you haven't in years. Daniel flinched as if I'd hit him. And there it is, the truth. Daniel, no, it's okay. I needed to hear it. He stood up, his decision apparently made. I can't compete with a fantasy, Philo. I can't be the perfect man who exists only in text messages and stolen moments. I'm just a regular guy who works hard and loves his family and tries to do the right thing. That's not what I meant, isn't it? He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. I was hoping we could work this out. I was hoping you'd choose us over him. But I can see you've already made your choice. What is that? Divorce papers. I'm filing for divorce and primary custody of Tessa. The world seemed to tilt sideways. You can't take my daughter from me. I'm not taking her. I'm protecting her from growing up in a broken home where her mother is emotionally involved with another man. I'm not emotionally involved with him. Then prove it. Delete his number. Block him on everything. Choose your family over whatever this is. He held out his phone. Call him right now and tell him you can't talk to him anymore. Tell him you're choosing your marriage. I stared at the phone like it was a weapon. The thought of cutting contact with Evan, of losing the one person who made me feel understood and valued, felt impossible. I can't. Why not? Because the truth clawed its way out of me. Because he's the only person who makes me feel like myself anymore. Daniel nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed something he'd already known. Then we're done. He moved toward the stairs, presumably to say goodnight to Tessa, but I caught his arm. Daniel, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can what? Pretend you're not in love with someone else? I'm not in love with him. Maybe not, but you're not in love with me either. Not anymore. The words hit me like a physical blow because I couldn't deny them. Somewhere along the way, I had fallen out of love with Daniel, or at least with the life we'd built together. I'd been going through the motions of marriage while my heart was elsewhere. I want to be, I whispered. I want to love you the way I used to. But you don't, and I can't live with someone who's settling for me while dreaming of someone else. He gently pulled his arm free and headed upstairs. I heard him talking softly to Tessa, the murmur of bedtime routines and father-daughter intimacy that I was apparently about to lose. When he came back downstairs, he had a suitcase in his hand. "You're leaving again?" "I'm moving out. The papers will be served at your office tomorrow. I suggest you get a lawyer." "Daniel, please, think about what you're doing. Think about Tessa." "I am thinking about Tessa. I'm thinking about what kind of example we're setting for her about love and commitment and what marriage should look like." "So you're just giving up?" "No, Philo, you gave up. I'm just finally accepting it." The front door closed behind him with the same quiet finality as before, but this time I knew he wasn't coming back. I stood alone in our living room, divorce papers in my hand, and finally understood the true cost of my choices. My phone buzzed, another text from Evan. This time I didn't even look at it. Friday morning arrived with the kind of grey, drizzling rain that seemed to match my mood perfectly. I'd barely slept, spending most of the night staring at the divorce papers Daniel had left behind. The legal language was cold and clinical, reducing 9 years of marriage to a series of claims and counterclaims. I kept telling myself this was just Daniel being dramatic, that he'd calm down and we'd find a way to work things out. But the methodical precision of the documents, the detailed financial arrangements, the custody schedule, it all felt terrifyingly real. At the office, I tried to lose myself in work, but concentration was impossible. Every few minutes, I'd catch myself staring at my phone, debating whether to call Daniel, whether to text Evan, whether there was any way to undo the mess I'd created. Around 10 a.m., Amaris appeared at my desk with her usual bright smile and a cup of coffee from the good cafe down the street. "You look terrible," she said, with characteristic bluntness. "What happened?" I gave her a brief rundown of Thursday night's conversation, though I left out some of the more damaging details. Even now, even with my marriage falling apart, I wasn't ready to fully admit how far I'd let things go with Evan. "He's bluffing," Amaris said confidently. "Men always threaten divorce when they feel insecure. Give him a week to cool off, and he'll come crawling back." "I don't think so. You didn't see him, Amaris. He was different, cold, like he'd already made up his mind. So let him file. Divorce is expensive and complicated. Once he realizes what he's looking at in terms of legal fees and splitting assets, he'll reconsider." But her reassurances felt hollow. The Daniel I'd seen last night wasn't operating on emotion anymore. He was operating with the same methodical precision he brought to his accounting work, and that scared me more than anger or jealousy ever could. Around noon, Rebecca approached my desk with an apologetic expression. "Philo, there's a courier here to see you. He says he has a delivery that requires your signature." My stomach dropped. I followed Rebecca to the reception area, where a man in a uniform was waiting with a large manila envelope. "Philomene Vane?" "Yes." "I need you to sign here, please." The envelope was thick, official-looking, with the name of a law firm I didn't recognize in the return address. My hand shook slightly as I signed for it, acutely aware that several of my colleagues were watching with curious expressions. Back at my desk, I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were copies of the divorce petition, custody documents, financial disclosure forms, and a cover letter from Daniel's attorney outlining the terms of the proposed settlement. It was all there in black and white. Daniel was seeking primary custody of Tessa, citing my emotional infidelity and unstable behavior. He was asking for the house, the majority of our shared assets, and child support. The only thing he was leaving me was my car and my retirement account. But it was the attached evidence that made my blood run cold. Photo printouts showed me dancing with Evan at the Velvet Loop, the images grainy but unmistakably intimate. There were screenshots of my text conversations going back 3 weeks, every flirtatious exchange, every complaint about Daniel, every moment of emotional intimacy laid bare. Bank records showed my spending patterns, highlighting purchases that could be construed as preparing for dates or trying to impress someone new. Credit card statements from restaurants where I'd met Amaris for lunch, with timestamps that suggested longer, more leisurely meals than I'd admitted to Daniel. Most damaging of all was a detailed timeline of my behavior over the past month, documenting everything from the frequency of my texts with Evan to the nights I'd come home late to the times I'd been distracted or unavailable for family activities. "Oh my God," I whispered, staring at the evidence of my life reduced to legal ammunition. "What is it?" Rebecca asked, noticing my expression. "Nothing, just work stuff." But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. Daniel had been building a case against me for weeks, maybe months, documenting every sign of my emotional withdrawal from our marriage. The quiet, methodical man I'd dismissed as boring had been systematically gathering evidence of my betrayal. My phone rang. An unknown number, but I answered anyway, hoping against hope it might be Daniel calling from his lawyer's office to tell me this was all a mistake. "Mrs. Vane, this is Jennifer Morrison from Morrison, Blake & Associates. I'm representing your husband in your divorce proceedings." Yes. "I'm calling to inform you that we've filed the necessary paperwork with the court. You have 30 days to respond with your own attorney. I'd strongly recommend you seek legal representation as soon as possible. This is all happening very fast. Your husband has been quite thorough in documenting the grounds for divorce. The evidence of emotional infidelity is substantial. If you're hoping to contest the custody arrangement, you'll need to act quickly." The line went dead. I sat at my desk, surrounded by the normal bustle of office life, feeling like I was drowning. Colleagues were going about their daily routines, answering phones, attending meetings, dealing with the ordinary problems of corporate life. Meanwhile, my entire world was collapsing. "Philo?" Amaris appeared at my cubicle again, her expression concerned. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I handed her the papers without a word, watched her face change as she read through the evidence, saw her confident dismissal of Daniel's threats evaporate as the reality of the situation became clear. "Jesus, Philo. He's been documenting everything." "I know. Some of these text messages, they look really bad out of context." "I know. And the photos. When did he take these?" "I think he followed me to the bar that first night. Remember, I thought I saw someone watching." Amaris flipped through more pages, her expression growing increasingly grim. "This is serious. He's not bluffing. He's going for everything." "What do I do?" "You get a lawyer, a good one, and you prepare to fight." But as I looked at the evidence spread across my desk, I wondered what I was fighting for. Daniel had been right about everything. I had been emotionally unfaithful. I had prioritized my relationship with Evan over my marriage. I had been comparing my husband to another man and finding him lacking. The worst part was that seeing it all laid out in legal documents didn't make me want to fight for my marriage. It made me realize how far gone things really were. My phone buzzed. A text from Evan. "Haven't heard from you since yesterday. Everything okay?" For the first time since I'd met him, the message didn't bring a smile to my face. Instead, it brought a crushing wave of regret. This man, who I barely knew, who represented nothing more than a fantasy of what my life could be like, had cost me everything real and solid in my world. I typed back, "No, everything is not okay. My husband is divorcing me and trying to take my daughter. I can't talk to you anymore." His response came quickly. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. If there's anything I can do—" "There isn't. Please don't contact me again." I blocked his number before he could respond, then sat staring at my phone, wondering why doing the right thing felt so much like another loss. The rest of the day passed in a blur of legal research and phone calls to divorce attorneys. By 5 o'clock, I had consultations scheduled with 3 different lawyers and a growing understanding of just how bad my situation really was. The evidence Daniel had gathered wasn't just thorough. It was devastating. Any judge looking at those text messages, those photos, that timeline of emotional withdrawal, would see exactly what Daniel's lawyer wanted them to see. A wife who had checked out of her marriage and was pursuing another man. The custody battle would be even worse. Daniel had documentation of my late nights, my distracted parenting, my emotional unavailability. He had witnesses, his family members who'd heard me publicly humiliate him at his mother's birthday party. He had a stable home, a steady income, and the moral high ground. I had a car, a retirement account, and the growing realization that I'd destroyed my family for a fantasy. That evening, I sat in my empty house, divorce papers spread across the kitchen table, and finally understood the true cost of my choices. I'd wanted to feel alive, desired, appreciated. I'd wanted someone to see me as more than a wife and mother and household manager, but in pursuing that feeling, I'd lost everything that actually mattered. My husband, my daughter, my home, my family. All of it was slipping away because I'd been too selfish and too blind to appreciate what I had while I had it. My phone remained silent. No texts from Evan, no calls from Daniel, no messages from friends who might have heard about the divorce through the gossip network that connected all our lives. Just silence and the echo of choices I couldn't take back. The next morning, I would call lawyers and begin the process of fighting for whatever scraps of my old life I could salvage. But tonight, I sat alone in the house that would soon belong to someone else, and finally understood that some mistakes can't be undone, some betrayals can't be forgiven, and some marriages, once broken, can't be repaired. Daniel had been right about everything. I'd made my choice long before I'd been willing to admit it. Now I had to live with the consequences.